I was sitting in a cafe with my friend Grace and talking about the wedding. It was already in 3 days. I took a sip of coffee and suddenly noticed something white in it. It was a tooth. Grace and I were in shock and were about to call the waiter when suddenly one more tooth plopped into the cup right out of my mouth. I froze in horror. No, that was not true. I was a college student and I was preparing to marry Glam. We loved each other and already lived together. I was just returning home. I wanted to see Glam as soon as possible and suddenly some guy abruptly snatched the bag out of my hands. Before I knew it, he already disappeared into the crowd. Heck, there was a wallet there. At least I left my phone in my pocket. I dialed Glam and told him about what had happened. He immediately replied not to get upset and go home. He and Mandy were already waiting for me. Mandy was Glam's half-sister. She used to hang out with us a lot. When I got home, Mandy and Glam were chatting in the kitchen. I kissed Glam on the cheek, to which Mandy said that she might get jealous, and then she smiled. Sisterly, of course. We sat down to drink tea. I told Mandy about my dream, the perfect smile at the wedding. I wanted to do teeth whitening, but as luck would have it, my wallet was stolen. Mandy immediately waved her hand and said that she would pay for an appointment with a dentist she knew. It would be a wedding present. I hugged Mandy. Glam had such a cool sister. The very next day, I went to the dentist, but as soon as I was in a dentist chair, he reached for my tooth with forceps. I pressed myself into a chair and shouted that I had come for a whitening. The dentist slapped his forehead, said that he was working hard, and reached for other tools. The result exceeded my expectations. The smile was snow-white. After thanking the doctor, I went home and immediately went to bed for fatigue. In the morning, I met with my friend Grace. I wanted to brag about my smile. But in the cafe, instead of bragging, I screamed in horror. My teeth were falling out one by one, and there was nothing I could do. The people around me started looking at me. I jumped up and immediately ran back to the dentist. He had to fix everything. But after the examination, he said that I was allergic to a whitening agent. He could make me implants, but they had an unreasonable price. I had no money of my own, and I fell into despair. No, right before the wedding. The dentist offered to put gold-plated crowns, but I waved it off. I don't need anything from you. When I returned home in tears, I noticed a parcel on the doorstep. This was the wedding dress that Glam ordered for me. Maybe this would cheer me up. I immediately opened the box in anticipation, but froze. Instead of a white wedding dress, there was a dirty brown one inside. I didn't understand anything, but Glam couldn't be wrong, and his last name was on the box. Only the initials were different. Apparently, they confused. I immediately called the salon to sort it out, but because of the fallen teeth, I lisped a lot, and the administrator did not understand a word. In the end, I lost one more tooth. I hung up and threw the phone on the couch. Heck. And then the phone rang again. Glam. God, I can't talk. I had to reject the call and text that I would be at a friend's house. I didn't want him to see me like this. Glam also reminded me that we had a family dinner with his parents in the evening. They were travelers, and they came right before the wedding to see me for the first time. Very timely. But I could not refuse. In the evening, Glam, his sister Mandy, and I were waiting for their parents at the restaurant. Glam wanted to kiss me, but I moved away from him to Mandy. She asked me to show a smile, and I immediately grabbed a glass and drank a strange-tasting juice, just not to communicate with anyone. Gradually, I relaxed. My head suddenly began to spin. I wanted to talk endlessly, and I didn't care about my teeth. I was lisping, and Glam was looking at me in disbelief. Suddenly, my favorite song started playing. I immediately jumped up and started to have fun like it was the last chance of my life. The others were sitting in their seats looking at me in shock. Boring people. Then an older couple came into the restaurant, but the man seemed so handsome, like Glam in old age. I immediately started flirting with him and dragging him to dance, but the man got angry and pushed me away, and I tripped and pushed the table. Worried, Glam helped me up and rudely told me that these were his parents. Parents? We made an interesting acquaintance. I laughed, and then I felt a few more teeth fall out. One of them fell right into the glass of Glam's mother. But she was in such shock that she did not notice it and raised the glass to her mouth. She took a sip, and the tooth struck in her throat. The woman choked and barely cleared her throat. Everyone was looking at me in shock, and I didn't care. I laughed out loud, standing in the center of the hall. But Glam did not share the joy, but only looked upset and shook his head. And then the guard came up to me to sit me down. No, I will not give up without a fight. I grabbed the food from the guests' plates and started throwing the chicken at the guards, but I was still captured. And Glam took his parents and left the restaurant. I wanted to run after them, but the guards held me tightly. Hey, let go! My fiancé is there! I almost pulled away when suddenly I fell, and then there was darkness. I woke up already in the cell with a terrible headache. I couldn't remember anything. What kind of filth was mixed into my juice? And then I felt that I had no teeth at all. I looked more like a homeless woman, not a bride. Grace went to bail for me and told me that I had been brawling for about an hour and the guards had called the cops to keep me in the cell. I was horrified to remember the whole nightmare. Glam would not forgive me. After thanking Grace, I immediately went to Glam. I needed to save the relationship, but Mandy met me on the threshold. I was glad, but she suddenly snapped that she would not let me in. Hey, I have something important to tell Glam. But she stood her ground. I clenched my fists. No, Glam had to find out the truth before he broke up with me. Abruptly pushing Mandy away, I rushed into Glam's room. He looked at me with a mixture of resentment and pain, and I took a deep breath. It was difficult to speak without teeth, but I tried. Glam, I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you. But then Mandy started dragging me out the door and shouting at him not to believe the airheaded girl. Tears streamed down my cheeks. This was not true. At the door, in despair, I confessed, I'm pregnant with your baby. Mandy immediately started shouting that the child was definitely not his and tried to push me out the door, but this time, Glam told her to stop. Mandy reluctantly let me out, and Glam doubtfully asked why I hadn't told him earlier. I sobbed. It was supposed to be a surprise for the wedding, but now I'm not sure that there will be a wedding. And these teeth began to fall out after Mandy's dentist. The dress he ordered turned out to be brown, strange juice, as if everyone's is against our marriage. Glam stood for a few seconds and thought. I was ready for the worst. But he suddenly said, I didn't order a dress for you, but there was your last name. And then I looked at his sister in shock and suddenly realized there were her initials on the box with the dress. And she recommended a dentist to me. Mandy began to slowly step back and kept telling Glam not to listen to my nonsense. Glam picked up the phone and threatened that he would call the dentist and find out everything from him. He wouldn't want to lose his license and cover for Glam's sister. Mandy clenched her fists and suddenly screamed that she had been in love with Glam since childhood, and I was the third wheel in their wonderful relationship. That's why she tried to ruin the wedding. She set this whole thing up with my teeth, put poison in the juice, but everything was useless, and therefore she would have to take matters into her own hands. The next second, Mandy suddenly attacked me, shouting that she would not give up Glam. But Glam pulled her away, growling that Mandy should not dare to approach me again. You are just a sister to me, Glam said, and she is my love. Then Glam looked into my eyes and finished. My destiny and my bride. I was ready to melt with happiness. Of course, the wedding had to be postponed a little, and it turned out to be much more modest. Glam gave most of the money to my dental implants. But still, we had a wedding and it was beautiful. Mandy was not invited. There were enough adventures without her. Glam even got into a fight with a witness and was left with a broken tooth. But this only added laughter to the happiest day of our lives. I realized that even the closest people can make mistakes, but no obstacle will break true love. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Haley. I'm 17. I'm still in school. I didn't think my entire life would change so early when my dad decided to fall in love with my best friend. Have you ever been in a situation where you suffered from the betrayal of a loved one? My dad is a tennis coach, and he trains at the best girls' sports academy in the state. I studied at the school since I was 5, and my dad always wanted to make me a champion. I loved the sport, but I did hate training. 4 times a week, twice a day, my dad coached me day and night. all the time being so cold, so demanding to me. It was a nightmare. He was angry and said that as I have average sports abilities, I need to work harder than the others. One day, he left me to practice my serve technique for the whole day off. It was cruel. I even burst into tears of resentment. My friend Jessica also played tennis, but in a different school. She understood me better than anyone else because she knew that achieving any results requires a lot of work. When I complained to her about my dad, she supported me and I felt better. And then one day, Jessica came with wonderful news. Her parents moved closer to the sports academy where my dad worked. And oh gosh, she transferred to training with him. I was so happy. I hoped that feeling her support during our workout would make my life easier. Finally, there will be someone who understands me. Finally, Jessica will see my struggle and sympathize with me. From that moment on, my life began to change dramatically, and so did our friendship. It turned out that Jessica had exceptional abilities. She was a real strong player. I was upset that Jessica was doing so much better than I ever could, and I started to realize that in her shadow, I became totally invisible for my own dad. I could neither bear nor ignore his admiring glances at Jessica. Have you ever been in that situation where your friend does something important way better than you? I began to avoid Jessica. After our training sessions, I tried to get out of the locker room faster so that I wouldn't even have to talk to her. Soon, the competition season began. Our whole group waited with bated breath for my dad to read out the name of the one who deserves to represent our academy before others. I didn't expect to be chosen, but I was hoping it wouldn't be Jessica. Then my dad said her name. No way! Absolutely no! I was going to explode in anger. My mom and I watched the competition broadcast on TV. She knew about my feelings, but kept saying that my victories were ahead. Despite her support, my hard feelings didn't go away. My father made the right bet, and Jessica had won. As I watched him congratulating her, I could barely hold my tears back. Jealousy began to grow in my soul. Why am I not as perfect as Jessica? After that trip, really strange things began to happen. My dad started giving more and more individual classes, not to me, but to my best friend. Well, now my ex-best friend. He also began spending more and more time at work, explaining to his wife that he was preparing Jessica for the next, even more serious competition. I started looking more closely at them in training and noticed that sometimes my dad touched Jessica. At first, I couldn't believe my eyes. He hugged her after a successful serve, or the other way, patted her on the shoulder slightly after an imperfect hit. Showing the direction of the racket, he came closer to her, and it seemed to me even snuggled. Had my dad a crush on my friend? That thought struck me like a bolt of lightning. That evening, I wanted to tell my mother everything, but I stopped myself and decided to watch more to get a bulletproof evidence of this treacherous relationship. During Jessica's individual training, I hid under the window of the court and saw how often they took breaks to chat, sometimes laughing. And when the training session was over, Jessica got into my dad's car. No! Well, that was too much. I was shaking. I was overexcited. They went in the opposite direction from our home. I panicked. My heart was pounding. My mind was full of the worst perspectives of what might happen next. I jumped into a taxi and followed them like a real spy. I didn't know if I was doing right, but at that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to know the truth, whatever it was. The car stopped, and the traders came in the coffee shop. I didn't get close, but through large panoramic windows, I could see them sitting at a table, drinking coffee and talking. There was a moment when she started crying, and he did put his arms around her. It was a disaster. Everything collapsed. I was devastated. I decided that my father no longer needed my mom and me, and that my friend was blackmailing him with her feelings. I had to do something. My heart was going a mile a minute, and my head was exploding with different thoughts. How do I return my father to the family? I had no idea what to do. Should I tell my mom the terrible truth tonight, or should I wait? I knew it would break her heart, Have you ever been afraid to tell the truth to a loved one, knowing that it would hurt? That evening, I asked my mother carefully if she noticed something strange happening to Dad. She answered sadly, "Yes, of course. Did you notice that too, dear?" "It's hard not to notice," I grumbled through my teeth. "What are you going to do now?" "Just as always, to support your father. Let's hope his stress and fatigue will pass when the competition is over." So that's it. My mother didn't know a thing. Well, I had to make my own decision. I worked out a plan that was going to change my father's mind. I knew that I had to do something that would shake his mind, something that would switch all his attention from competitions to the family. At the same time, I knew that it must be something dangerous for me. The most important international competitions, those for which Jessica had been preparing so hard, were coming up. They were in Australia, and I simply couldn't allow my father to go with that girl to the foreign country for a few days. So, my dad went to the airport. I had only 2 hours left from check-in to boarding. I ran to the nearest crossroad. I don't think I even realized at that moment how serious the consequences of my adventure could be. I stopped in the middle of the road. My plan was to get hit by a car. I wanted my father to get a call from a hospital saying that I was in serious condition, even in intensive care maybe. I wanted to see if he would choose me or Jessica. Would he be able to give up such an important trip for me? Of course, I was terrified, but my pain and jealousy were stronger than my fear. They were suffocating me. Suddenly, I heard a sharp screech of brakes. I thought I was falling. I would really have fallen if I hadn't been caught by someone's strong hands. When I opened my eyes, I saw a man with an angry face shaking me by the shoulders and shouting loudly, "Are you crazy? Where are your parents?" There was an astonished crowd around. It turned out that the car did not hit me. By miracle, the driver managed to slow down just a half step from me. In a huff, he called the police, and they called my father from a police station. I was thoroughly interrogated there, whether I had a mental disorder, whether my parents beat me at home. I started to realize how stupid I've been. I caused such a trouble not only to myself, but also to my family. An hour later, my father was at the station. I saw him talking to a police officer and signing papers. Then they let me go with him. I was surprised when we went to the park because I thought my dad would make a scandal at home. Sitting down in front of me, my father looked at me seriously, but without any malice, and said, "Talk to me." In tears, I told him everything. All the suspicions that have tormented me so much lately. My father was shocked. "How could you think so about me?" He grabbed his head. Then he hugged me tightly, pressed me to his very heart. He said that he loves only my mother and me. Well, and tennis, his job. He said that I was wrong about his connection with Jessica. What I took to be an intimate approach were actually his attempt to support a student, nothing more. After all, Jessica had to work on herself so hard that there were times when she couldn't cope with the tension anymore and felt depressed. That night when I saw them at the coffee shop, Jessica told my dad that she was exhausted and wanted to leave tennis. He took her for coffee to discuss the situation, to talk seriously about her problems and find a solution if possible. And, as it turned out, this whole idea belonged to my mother. He consulted with her about everything. More than that, my friend's parents were also aware of it. Now I was genuinely in shock, but my father wasn't angry. He apologized for being so cold to me and for not paying me enough time and attention. He said that it was his own fault, and he also offered me to choose on my own. Would I like to continue playing tennis? Or would it be better for me to choose some other activity? I asked about Jessica, and he answered that she had to fly to the competition alone without his moral support. I was ashamed of my selfishness and blind jealousy. I also asked my dad to forgive me, and then I called Jessica. We chatted. I didn't say I'm aware of her stress-related problem. I just tried my best to cheer her up, and it seemed to work out all right. The next day, the whole family froze in front of the TV and supported my best friend. And of course, she won. Yes! In the end, I decided to stay in tennis. After all, this was already an important part of my life. I began to practice more, to work harder despite of all, and I didn't resent my dad's temper anymore. I knew it was love staying behind his severity. And yes, one day my dad did fall in love the second time, the day I, his daughter, was born. Did you like my story? Please Please rate my video and don't forget to share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and come back to us for new stories. Have a nice day.
I opened my eyes, stretched sleepily, and yawned. Slowly turned over on the other side, and then my head started spinning. The whole city was in front of my eyes because I was lying on the edge of the roof of a high-rise building. How did I end up here? I didn't have time to get up when suddenly someone pushed me in the back and I flew down. A week ago, nothing foreshadowed trouble. I went to school as usual. I was friends with Kate. We were inseparable from childhood. We went everywhere together, and as we got older, our friendship became even stronger. Kate didn't even date anyone, as she always said that friendship should come first. And we also had a common enemy, Ricky. This tinker tried to be friends with us in junior high, but once she snitched on us for skipping classes. And since then, Kate and I couldn't stand her. Snitch. Since then, we were feuding, and then Ricky and I liked the same guy. Gail studied in a parallel class and was perfect in everything. Beautiful, smart, charming. No wonder that this sneaky Ricky had her eye on him. Since then, she and I were fighting for Gail's attention, and Kate helped me. She helped me choose clothes. She could put makeup on me. I couldn't have done it without Kate. And finally, Gail had his eye on me. He gave gifts, paid attention, even invited me on a date. I was over the moon with happiness, which cannot be said about Ricky, but I didn't care about her. Gail and I started seeing each other every day, but soon, Kate began to behave in a strange way. She was constantly walking around looking annoyed and thoughtful, but I still didn't have time to talk to her about it. I was distracted by Gail. And at lunch, he said that tomorrow he was throwing a cool party at his place. I was delighted. At the party, Kate returned to normal. We had fun together, danced, laughed at Ricky. She showed up in some awful dress. But then Gail called me and I spent the rest of the time at the party with him. I caught the envious glances of other girls, especially Ricky's. Envy, Gail is still mine. Soon, I became terribly hot. I went away to drink water, but I only took a couple of sips. I began to feel sleepy. I lay down on the sofa and didn't even notice how I instantly passed out. When I opened my eyes, a terrible smell of alcohol hit my nose. It was dark around. Wait, this wasn't Gail's house. I immediately jumped up, looking around. I was sleeping on a park bench. There was a terrifying silence around. Also, there was a homeless man lying next to me. A chill ran down my spine. I ran away, and then I called Kate to find out what happened yesterday. But as luck would have it, she didn't pick up the phone. I wanted to call Gail, but then the phone turned off. The charging ran out. I felt really creepy. Somehow I got home. It was good that our city was small, and I quickly got my bearings on the terrain. My parents sent me to school almost immediately. I felt terribly tired, but as soon as I entered the classroom, I immediately asked Kate what happened yesterday, but she shrugged her shoulders. She doesn't know anything because she left before I did. At recess in the cafeteria, I told Kate what had happened, and it suddenly dawned on her. She said that Ricky had set me up. I looked back at Ricky. Of course, no wonder she looked at me and Gail like that, envied me. So she decided to teach me a lesson. Kate offered to pacify Ricky. I agreed with her and resolutely went to the sneak, blocking her way. I cut off that either she stopped or she would be in trouble. Ricky was blinking her eyes, playing the fool. This only made me even more angry. But then the bell rang. Everyone left the dining room, and I quickly returned to finish my juice. The familiar feeling of drowsiness filled me again. I put my head on the table and closed my eyes. I wanted to sleep. This time, I woke up from grunting. There were several pigs standing right above me. They were sniffing me. Was this a barn? I jumped up. God, what was happening to me? Was I going crazy? When I got out of the barn, I immediately ran home. I hoped no one noticed me. And how would I explain my appearance to my parents? all dirty, disheveled. But it turned out they found out everything themselves. In the public page of our city, they published a photo of me sleeping in a stable with a pig in my arms. In the comments, everyone made fun of me and called me a lunatic. I was overcome with despair. I was not a lunatic. After that post, I didn't want to go to school, but my parents didn't even listen. They strictly told me to go to the shower and then immediately to classes. My folks thought that I got drunk with friends and that's why I ended up in a stable. At school, the nightmare continued. All my classmates laughed at me, pushed me, and called me a pig. I was so hurt and offended. It was good that Kate was there. She didn't turn away from me like the others, but supported me. I was so grateful to her. This was real friendship. And then I saw that stinker Ricky. She walked down the halls as if nothing had happened and brazenly smiled in my face. She didn't understand the words, did she? Let's get down to action. We shoved Ricky into a toilet stall and locked her in there. She was crying and asking me to let her go, but I didn't even listen and turned off the light. She would know how to spoil my life. Kate and I were sure that Gail would now turn away from me. Kate calmed me down and said that nothing terrible had happened. But she would always be there for me. I already came to peace. But suddenly Gail came up to me in the hall and hugged me. He whispered that he didn't care what others said. He still liked me. His words warmed my chest. I sobbed and buried my nose in his shoulder. Thank you, Gail. You're the best guy in the world. We spent the whole day together. And then Gail asked me out on a date. I immediately agreed. Already in the evening, I was sitting at the mirror and putting on makeup when suddenly everything swam before my eyes. Not again. I grabbed the table, but it was too late. I blacked out. When I opened my eyes, my head was spinning. I found that I was on the edge of the roof of a high-rise building. I didn't have time to get up when suddenly someone pushed me in the back and I flew down. At the last second, I managed to grab the edge of the roof. My heart was pounding and my throat was dry. Was this really the end? And then I saw Kate standing over me. Save me. But she broke into a terrible grin and suddenly stepped on my fingers with all her might. What are you doing? Kate snapped that she wasn't going to save me. After all, this story with sleepwalking was arranged by her. Kate couldn't watch our friendship crumble because of Gail and decided to embarrass me in the eyes of the guys so that everything would be as before. But it didn't help. I was in shock and could not believe my ears. And Kate said firmly that if she didn't get me, then no one would get me. A lump rose in my throat. No, Kate, come to your senses. We're friends. But she only pressed harder on my fingers. This was the end. Now I was definitely going to fall. Just as I was about to open my fingers, someone grabbed Kate and pulled her away. I heard the sounds of a struggle, and I tried to hold on with the last of my strength. Then Kate fell asleep, and someone grabbed me and dragged me by the arms. I got up and saw Ricky in front of me. Kate was lying unconscious in the back. It turned out that Ricky got out of the toilet and went to my house to sort things out. But she saw Kate dragging me somewhere. That's how Ricky followed her. The flow of thoughts made my head spin again. Ricky took my arm and led me down from the roof. Soon, Kate was arrested. They appointed community service and put her under house arrest. I continued dating Gail, and I was happy. Besides, Ricky became a wonderful friend to me. As a plus, she wasn't jealous of me at all. Ricky wasn't a snitch at all. It turned out that Kate arranged everything and deliberately set Ricky up so as not to share me with anyone. It was terrible. But thanks to Kate, I realized that any relationship, both friendship and love, should not drive you crazy. You should not build your world around one person. There should be harmony everywhere, like I had with Gail and Ricky. Did you like the story? Like it and subscribe to our channel.